Hey, what's up? My name is Jeffrey, and I am a fantasy animator who goes by the name Living Cards MTG. Now, my basis is in motion graphics design, but I've been doing fantasy animation for about 5 years now, and I get a lot of questions about how I do this kind of stuff. And when I started, I kind of wanted to see if I could capture that lightning in a bottle, but since then we've had so many awesome animators come into the community and it's grown, and I want to share some of my techniques. So I'm doing my first tutorial today, and I'm so glad you've joined me for how to animate 2D artwork. So we're going to look at the Grim Tutor piece of artwork that I animated just recently for the new core set 2021, which should be really exciting. And we're going to go in, we're going to look at every layer, we're going to look at how I did it, but we're going to go quick. So this is probably not for beginners. What I would say, if you're just starting out in Photoshop or After Effects, if you aren't familiar with the interface, if you don't kind of have a grasp of all the effects and everything, I wouldn't start here. Of course, don't run away. You can watch this. But if something doesn't make sense, I just want to preface this by saying this is not going to be a beginner tutorial where I go through and tell you, go up effect and apply each layer. I'm going to show you what was on there and how I used it. Okay, so welcome to Photoshop, where reality check, you're going to be spending a lot of time if you want to do this kind of work. And yeah, a lot of people think, wow, okay, I'll just grab an image and go right on into After Effects. It doesn't work like that. You have to prep your image files, and it's a long and kind of arduous process where you have to isolate every piece of the image that you want to animate. It needs to be its own layer so that you can affect it individually without affecting the rest of the image. So what that means is, for Grim Tutor, we need to isolate the stream of blood. We need to isolate the blood writing that's kind of scrawling out here. We need a page that's blank, and then if we need to take a look and see if there's any background stuff, but basically once we have that, we should be good to go. We could have done even more. I could have isolated all the candles and everything. It's kind of all up to you and the way you see it playing out in your mind. So the first thing I did was, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. Again, I'm just using the artwork that I had off of Twitter, so not great resolution. You're going to find that a lot of times you don't get exactly what you want. Obviously, it'd be amazing to have the original artwork, and I've been very lucky to get to work with some of the high resolution files. But you work with what you got, especially when you're starting out. Just start grabbing stuff, start trying stuff, pick a technique that you want to see if it works and has a cool effect, and just go. Okay, so the first thing I did, I'm going to remove this, is I photoshopped out the blood stream. Okay, very simple here. You guys probably figured out how to do this. It's our friend the clone tool. So we're grabbing the clone tool, pick something that's fairly comparable, put it in there, and know that because this is going to be covered up, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. Like, obviously you can see the little bit of blue in the background there, and that kind of gives it away. But when the blood is over top of it, I'm not really looking at that. I'm looking at the cool blood stream and everything. So you just need something there so there's not a hole in the artwork. Anything you take away, you have to add back in. A lot of clone tools. Very seldomly do I try to go in and actually repaint behind there, because it's really hard to, capture all the layers of their effects and everything that they've done. Mostly clone tool. Content replace fill, is going to be your friend. So again, if you're not familiar with those techniques, that's going to be some beginner stuff. You want to start there with some simpler things, but that's how we did it. Clone tool, fill in the background. Okay, so that gives us a really nice background plate to work with. We're going to move from here. And the next thing we're going to do is create this page. And here's how we created this. So let me go down here to my storage layer. And I always recommend that you make a storage folder in all of your Photoshop files. This is where you're going to save copies and iterations of what you've done. If something's working, great. Duplicate it and then move on to your next part of your effect you're trying. That way you don't get through a sequence of laying effects out on top of something and find out, oh no, I took a misstep and it's crunched down, or you've merged your layers and you've lost what you've done. You never want to do that. So I'm going to show you how this worked. Essentially what I did was I simply cut out the page, right? So just made it a nice little mask layer here. So we're going to use the alpha of this, which means that the place where it's solid and not transparent. This is all transparency. This is solid, obviously. And I use that as a clipping mask for just a simple gradient layer. So I kind of took some pieces of color from the actual page itself. And I made, just kind of going across here. Now, obviously that doesn't look right. It's very flat. So I added a second layer. And what I did was I took an inner shadow layer style, and I kind of laid that in there to kind of create that lovely page divide. So now that looks pretty good. We've got that. So I duplicated that before I merged. If you took that and you merged, you saw something you wanted to fix later, what are you going to do? So here's how that came out. Now you'll notice there's a nice little bit of texture on here. I'm breaking my own rules. I actually don't have the texture layer that I added on it, but just Google texture, cool texture, find some kind of rocky something that adds a little bit of an organic feeling to it. Throw it onto an overlay layer and play with the opacity until you get it feeling just right. And you can see when it sits here on top of our thing, looks pretty good. Now, something I noticed that it was actually in the final animation. This page is too dark. This lightness right in here, I didn't translate that very well. That's on me. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to notice things when you go back, and you can pull up your curves here and we can fix it. And we could have done that really quickly, and then, that it looks better. That's too bright, but you know what I mean. Don't worry about it. If something didn't look wrong to you when you were putting it together, chances are people aren't really going to notice it, and it's going to be okay. But one thing that I did notice was that our blood splatter was, when I had isolated it, and I'll show you how I did that in just a second, it was a little bit bright. I don't really like that. I'm going to switch it over here to multiply. Something you can do that the artists working on these cards can't is work in the RGB space, because we're using a computer, obviously, and what they're making is going to go into print. Really quickly, I don't want to go into this a lot, but the difference between RGB and CMYK is that we have access to a richer and top-end vibrant colors that print colors can't replicate in the real life, because you can only go so far from what the eye can see. When you actually print something out and take a look at it, it can only be as vibrant as as the machine can print. On the computer, we can go way above that, way above that. So if you can go crazy with the theory, but as long as you're keeping in the spirit, obviously we have to respect the artwork, but you can do things like, play with the blending modes, and like this white color right here, obviously we wouldn't use that, but that's something that you could never replicate in print. Just your eye couldn't see that. It wouldn't come out of the printer like that. So we'll use the multiply there to kind of blend it a little nicer. And very simply, the way that we did that, there's a lot of ways you could do this. You could go in here and do a select color range and kind of pick a nice little color and then play with the fuzziness. And that might get you some decent results. What I did was very simply grabbed the Magic Wand tool, and I just sort of got a decent tolerance on it, kind of picked a couple of color swatches that were nearby, and I said, okay, I like that. And then you go up here to select similar. So that'll just kind of grow it out. Now, obviously we got way too much here, but you can see, other than just a few little pieces there, and you can even do it again. You could use grow or whatever. But you want to get it as close as you can to kind of picking these out. And you say, okay, cool. That's what I want. And then I'll do a copy paste here. And then obviously I got way more than I wanted. So now I will come in here and select this. And then I have the area isolated that I'm interested in. And then I'm going to do a Control-Shift-I to invert the selection and delete it. Boom. So that fast, I've got a really nice little piece to work with. Now, I think I got a little more of the book down here than I wanted to, but again, it's all about playing with it. When we throw it on the page here, it looks pretty good, and it looks really good, especially when we set it to that multiply. So anyway, we're going to end up with that, coming away with that, and come away with some nice splatter. Spend some time on it, and you'll be good to go. Excuse me. All right, so now the last piece we need is this lovely blood stream, the blood dripping. Now you're going to notice that immediately the difference is from here to here, it's 3 times as long. Why would we do that? Well, okay, so part of the fun of all this is figuring out the effect that you're going to do and the way that you're going to do it. So I knew that I wanted to have blood dripping down. So very simply, I just took this isolated blood drip layer and duplicated it 3 times and then blended the pieces together to form this nice stick of blood. So what that enables me to do is then move it in the y-axis. So obviously with masking, those of you who are quite savvy can see how this is very simply achieved. This little piece down here is going to be our starting point, and then it kind of comes in. And if we pull it up, you can see that's exactly what I did. I have it move through. But if I had only had the original piece that was in the artwork, I mean, that's not very exciting. You want it, does that blood look like it's not telling a story? It has to flow for longer to sort of fill up the page. The artist's job is to capture the hero moment of the piece, where absolutely everything is sort of like locked into the most important section. And with After Effects, and what we're doing is we can tell a little bit before and a little bit after. And that's the story that you're creating with all this. That's where all the fun is. Okay, so we're ready to go into After Effects. We have our blood layer, we have our splatter layer, we have our page layer, and we have our base layer. And all these things are looking pretty good. And then we're going to head over to After Effects. So let's come on in. We're going to import things by just going ahead and double clicking and then and bringing it in. Make sure that you import the composition. Don't import the layer. If you import merge layer, you're not going to get anywhere because that doesn't give you anything to work with. That's just basically merging all the layers that you had just worked on. So now you're going to want to work into pre-comps, of course. If you will be familiar with After Effects as you're doing this. You're going to use pre-comps so that your effects only affect the layers that you're interested in having them do stuff on. So I have a base layer, as I turn that off. This is my base layer, but what I'm actually going to do all the effects on is the pre-comp I'm calling art. So I go in here, and we'll start at the top here, and I'm going to go ahead and actually turn everything off. And what I did to kind of frame it all in nicely, so I just took a nice solid layer, and I use the stencil alpha. So what that'll do is that'll say everything that happens below this. So if we turn on the smoke layer, everything that happens below this layer can only appear where the alpha, where I am not transparent on this layer. So I hope I'm explaining that okay. But essentially, I need this thing to drive everything below it. So where this is red, in all the layers below it in my timeline will only show up where this is red. And then obviously we hide the red part so you can actually see everything. So lock that and don't lock it before you set it to stencil alpha, but that gives us a nice thing. Now, could I have gone through and actually cropped that down and made that the size? And yes, but I was working quickly. So it's all about finding ways to do things. In After Effects, there's 110 ways to do every single effect that you're going to want to do. But you know what? It's about what works quickest and looks best. Okay, so let's dive right in. We're going to start from the bottom and we're going to work our way up. So I have a base layer. Very simple. I am using the base layer right here, and then I have above it a nice adjustment layer. An adjustment layer is a layer that houses effects, and just like the stencil alpha, it affects all the layers below it. So if I add layers above the adjustment layer, they will not be affected by it, and you can use that in different ways. Okay, so what have I done here? I went ahead and kind of masked out really crappily the background that I wanted to have this effect. And if I go ahead and throw a fill on here, you can see all this stuff is what I want to affect. And of course, that is going to be this smoky background. And then I used our friend Turbulent Displace, one of the most used and most overused effects that you can pick for this kind of thing. But it creates this sort of distorted kind of organic smoke, water, fire, everything you can use Turbulent Displace for. Because what it's doing is it's kind of undulating, is a word for you, between black and white on a doing math calculations. So it's saying every frame, or however long you set it to, I want a variable point between black and white, and then it's using that to drive how much it affects and distorts the layer below it. So lot of smart people used a lot of math, and at the end of the day, we get left with this really sweet looking, effect here. And then just to kind of keep it from affecting the edges, I went ahead and set that into another layer with a mask. So it's kind of like building up layers upon layers to do the final effect that you're interested in. But all this is a simple turbulent displace. And the animation that I used was an offset turbulence, because instead of using the evolution that looks like it's sitting still, the offset turbulence actually makes it look like it's moving in a direction. And I wanted the smoke to look like it's rising. Okay, so what that cost me was the ability to use the cycle evolution option. Obviously, the goal of this artwork was to create a perfect loop, and I try to do all of my stuff in perfect loops lately because it does really well on social media. People really like it, and I really like seeing it because you can sit there and watch it. I first got the idea for that. Everybody will remember this from the Days animation where the birds were coming across and everything. So anyway, so what we're going to do is to create the loop here. So obviously, if we jump between these two, I'm pressing home and I'm pressing end, and that's the best way to easily check if your animation is looping, and it's not. That's a huge snap between the background. Now, if you left that in and didn't try to do any looping effect and were cool with that, people would see it. People's eyes are smart, and it's not going to look natural, even if it's not a huge change. They're going to start to notice that in and out point, and that is not the effect that we want to go for. So how are we going to make this loop? Very simply, I'm going to add an additional second. So my base composition is 6 seconds. This composition is 7 seconds. And I'm going to do a crossfade, which is where I start with 100% opacity on the layer above, and the layer above is 0, and then the main layer is 100%. And they're gonna crossfade so that the layer above it is coming up to 100% opacity, and the layer below it is going down to 0%. So they fade, they interchange, and the way we make that work is I go in here to the art layer and show you. Apologies, my camera is covering up the actual layer in time, but here's how it looks. So as we go across, of course, it'd be helpful if we turn them on. Very simply, we just fade between the layers. Now, this can get you into trouble. Let's say you had an arm that you had animated going like this. If you try to crossfade and fade it back up to here, that's going to look terrible. You can't do that. So you're going to have to animate the arm going back up, and that's why usually creating a loop is next to impossible if you have a subject or like a figure or something that you punching or something. That's really hard to make it into a perfect loop, because you've done some sort of action, and then how are you going to undo the action to get it back to that starting point? But with it being organic, it's super easy to just crossfade, and nobody's going to notice. So that's one technique that we're gonna have to live with, even though it's kind of hacky to just fade up the opacity. It's fine. Fine. Don't worry about it too much. Okay. No big deal. And actually on this one, I only faded up the opacity of the layer above it, because if you can get away with that, we're not needing to fade out the layer below it, because we have the solid piece of artwork there. That'll make sense if you get in After Effects and give it an actual shot. And I believe I am going to make this project file available for people to download. So hold me to that. I think I'll put it up in the Google Drive where all the other animations are. So anyway, we'll figure all that out. Okay, so we'll turn our page layer on, and boy, that's looking good. Isn't that nice? That looks like a nice blank page ready to be scrawled on in blood. So nothing doing on there. I mean, I don't know what we could do. I mean, we could sit there. I mean, what if we added... This is what's so much fun. You sit here and we could add a page peel, and I didn't even do this in the original thing. I just had this idea. But what if we kind of pulled at this or something? I don't know. Maybe the wind is blowing. It's all about just having ideas and trying stuff. That's what's so fun about this. So what if we added like a little drop shadow or something that goes down, and then like makes that. See, look at me. I'm getting all excited. Should go back. And then we could take our page and kind of move our fold position so it kind of tugs at it a little bit. I didn't even do this. Maybe I should have. Whatever. Try ideas. You can't, when you're sitting in your little cave and you're animating away or doing whatever you do. Nobody's going to watch unless you're making a tutorial. So just try stuff. It's fun. Bring ideas to life. Your job is to tell, like I said, a little bit before, a little bit after the story, to create something that adds your interpretation of the artwork. And you're not going to get it right, according to everybody, ever. Somebody's always going to chime in the comments section and go, oh, well, I saw it this way. I didn't like that. I think they should have been rising. I think the rain should have been going up instead of down, because that's how it works in my mind. Don't worry about that, okay? This is your world, use the Bob Ross approach. This is your happy little grim tutor, thing. So do what you want. Okay, let's keep moving. Next effect, candles. Very simple. Stock footage. Go to YouTube. Find royalty free and make sure that people are okay with you using it. Obviously we're just using this for fun, for personal use, but still be a little careful. Make sure that nothing says like this is Shutterstock or something stolen. But just all I did here, grab a candle effect. I kind of laid them into place there. And then I added our nice little turbulent displace on that to make it a little bit more interesting. Very simple. And then go back here and I did the exact same looping effect that I did on the background smoke layer, which is I faded between them. They're so small, I get away with it. Nobody's going to notice. And then if we start doing our, front to back, end home, end home, end home, you can see that it's only advancing by 1 frame. It's because I set the end point of layer 1 to be 1 second before, and the end point of the layer coming in to be 1 second before the end, so that it creates that perfect loop. So, as soon as this layer is going out, it's coming back in right where it went out. So, end to end. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, take a look at the project file that I put up. All that will make more sense. Okay, moving on to, very exciting, the splat layer. Splat, that's what I called it. Splat. Very cool. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at how we did this. As you can see, it kind of nicely and organically appears. Now, initially, I want you to always be thinking about, like, how did he do this? And I bet you can guess that I used a mask. Yeah, exactly. So, lots of ways to animate a mask. If we go down here and hit the U key, you can see I just did the expansion. Okay, so start with the expansion very small, and then the expansion grows and it reveals it. And I put it right where the blood drip hits so that it starts from that and builds out into the nice layer. Kind of comes across. But that's quite boring, as if I turn this off. So look at this. Oh no, that's not right. That's terrible. It looks just like a circle expanding out. So that's where we bring in roughen edges. And just like turbulent displace, roughen edges is using that kind of organic, math-driven, black and white, noise. Noise is the word I was looking for, to create an organic edge on things. So how they do this, I have no idea. This is the absolute magic to me. But basically, it knows where the edges of your artwork are, or whatever your mask layer is, and it's going to come in for however much you set the border to, and apply the effect only to that area. So I went ahead and added that, and you can sit here and get crazy with it. Like, you turn up the complexity. That usually gives you more organic results, like right away. So you can turn it up too far, and then maybe it won't look as good. But if you turn up the complexity too much, it gets really small. And always remember, Twitter is going to kick the crap out of your GIFs and your videos and everything. So if you make things too small, you might actually lose the detail that you were looking for, and then you'll be like really sad when you see it up and it doesn't look as good as it did on your computer. So kind of try to find a happy medium. I went with 4 on the complexity, but you can play with the border, how much you want it to affect, and then the sharpness of the edge. Again, I'm not going into totally how to use these effects, but this is what I did, and creates that really, really, especially at the beginning, that awesome like bleeding out effect, where it all fills out. And obviously we have, some of the color from the book in there, but we just kill that with a nice little multiply on the layer. So we go in here, splat, multiply. Now, I have this set to, okay, so let's see what I did here. I have this set to, okay, so this is how we do the transition out. So pre-comp. Andrew Kramer, the guy who runs videocopilot.net, he says pre-comp about 50,000 times a tutorial. And obviously that's the best way to do things. If you have a set of effects that you want to apply, group those together into a folder, or what we call a pre-comp, and then start anew in a new comp, and you can nest comps. That's what they call it, nesting compositions, over and over and over and over and over. You can, every layer you can pre-comp if you want. And but I like to do it where I have a group of layers where things are being affected, and then I need to create a new larger scale effect. So for that, for our purposes, that is going to be the mask out. And I did the exact same thing. I mean, it's as lazy as can be. See, I have it turned on here so that you can see how it does. This mask is growing, right? Use roughen edges again. Same thing. I just, for it to go out, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if it came in small, like, why am I doing this with my hands? I can just show you. Came in very small right here, but then when it goes out, I wanted it to kind of, the whole width of the seam to kind of come out. So if I turn off my my little alpha inverted matte layer there, you can see it does the exact same effect as coming in, but since I set it to inverted, now it's driving off of where the layer is coming in. let me explain that better. Okay, alpha matte means that where the piece is not transparent, that's where I will appear. Alpha inverted matte means where the piece is transparent, that's where I will appear. So that's a concept that you have to play with, and you have to get it in your mind, the difference between alpha and alpha inverted. You'll play with it a couple of times and you won't even worry about it. It'll be second nature. Again, take a look at the folder. See if I set this to alpha matte, splat, alpha, see, inverted matte. If I set it to alpha matte, it doesn't work. It does kind of actually comes back in, and that's what I did to start. So obviously it's turned off now because we have this set, but it's the same idea. This is the alpha matte, and then to go back out, we're going to reverse that and go alpha inverted. Yay. Okay, and then the last thing that I did here that you probably didn't even notice on the video or on the original animation was I took a little tint, and I make the blood get darker. Now, Twitter compresses it, and nobody's probably going to notice that. Some things you just do for yourself. Like, I thought it would be cool if the blood kind of was like coagulated. I don't know the term, but got darker. The old blood as it settles on the page. Now, of course, it's only 6 seconds. That's probably not going to happen, but, it's magical blood. So, whatever. Enjoy it. Okay, so that's how we did that. We have our splat. We're splattered. We're smoky. We got candles. It's starting to look like a whole scene. Now we have to add that awesome blood dripping down. So I'm going to turn this on, and this is just as simple as it gets. I mean, all we do is we have the blood animating. If we go and hit our U key, we position, and boom, the blood comes from out of frame. Remember, it's only going to appear, this is cropping off everything outside of itself, this base layer. So we use that to drive it coming into frame. And then we simply go in here and we'll turn this on. This is yet another mask. I set it to alpha inverted so that I'm going to use the area where it's transparent. So obviously it's solid here, transparent here. This is where I want my blood to appear. And then as it gets here, I have if I go to my mask layer, I see I have a little 14% feather, or 14 pixel feather, and so that let's get in there. Zoom in, kind of comes in, and it looks like it's filling up the blood, right? Simple. So then it just kind of comes in, and it, once it's gone, it's actually, if I turn it on here, it's 100% hidden behind this layer. So if I turn off alpha, if I say no track matte, boom, all it is. That's all it is. Simple. Alpha inverted, and we get that nice flowing effect. And the best thing about this is the way that, like, you can actually see the little bumps, isn't that cool? Because that makes it look like it's moving, which it is moving, but that helps sell the effect, that it's sort of like pouring. Now, really quickly, we're going to talk about one of the most important concepts in After Effects animation, which is easing. And somebody called me out on Twitter and said I didn't get it right. And again, people are going to have their own opinions. People are going to say you did it too fast. They're going to say you did things too slow. Slow that down. Speed that up. I don't care what your opinion is. When I'm happy with this, I'm going to put it out in the world. And, I want you to see it. And if you like it, great. If you don't, move on. It's a piece of art. It's like something, it's just, everybody's a critic. So if you start putting something up, especially on Reddit, this is for the people who are actually going to try this. If you put something up on Reddit and you look at the comments and you're like, there's half of them are like, great job. Wow, this looks really cool. And there's several of them that are like, okay, what I would do right now is I would go back to school and learn about easing, and I would try to do it this way. Don't get discouraged, okay? People are armchair critics. Did they make it? No. You did. So you look at the people who are saying, great job, and encouraging you. And if you find a piece of critical feedback that is actually helpful and you think, wow, that's useful, great. But that's the exception and not the rule. I'm just forewarning you that everyone has their opinion. I'm sorry, I know this is a long tangent, but the very first animation that I ever did was Noah Bradley's Anger of the Gods. And I have the guy crouching, or actually I have the guy sort of rising up as the composition is moving through. And somebody on Twitter or somebody on Reddit was like, he should be crouching, I can't believe, but I thought maybe he's accepting his fate in this Anger of the Gods hell rain that's coming down. It's your interpretation. This is your world. Bob Ross is telling us to have fun and don't think about what other people say. So take the critics with an absolute grain of salt. Don't even give them a grain of salt. They're not worth that. So just do it for yourself. If you're happy with it, if it looks good to you, great. If somebody has a piece of feedback, learn from it. If they don't, just keep learning over time. You're going to keep getting better. And like I say, don't worry about it. Okay. So everything is working now. And we're going to add one more piece of this. This null layer, if you're seeing that, null layers are amazing. It's literally just like a little box here, and what these are useful for is transforming. This is After Effects 101. I don't know why I'm going into this, but you can use them for repositioning things. So if you want to do like a global repositioning of all your stuff, parent everything to this null layer, and then you can scoot it around, and happy days. Okay, last two things. Smoky smoke, more stock footage. So we'll go ahead and reveal that in our layer source. And go back here and I'll pull this in. So again, just look on YouTube. People have all kinds of stuff. I use this smoke in like everything that I make because I love it. And again, I just crossfaded it here. I'm going to show you some more. This has been really fun. So I think I'm going to make a few more of these. So I'll show you how to do some better and less hacky ways of looping things. There's lots of ways to loop things, but when it's an organic effect, especially like a subtle stock footage layer, as you can see, I don't even have, I do have this all the way up, but because it's smoky, it's supposed to be smoky. But if it's subtle, you're going to get away with a 1 second crossfade here. Nobody, if we actually solo this layer, you're going from this, whoops, let's turn off the transparency so it's even more obvious, but you're going from this to that. That's very subtle. Nobody's going to know that. Oops, did I get these off? Oh yeah, they're outside, so it doesn't matter. The layer is much obviously larger than our stencil. So cool. Boom. Yeah. Okay, so that's just adding environment. Okay, so let's talk really quickly about the overall composition. Background. We need to have some kind of something. You just don't want anything to be sitting that shouldn't be sitting. Take a look at trees. Can we add some movement there? What can we do? Even if it's turbulence displace, add some motion, add some life. You're trying to create a living world. And if something's sitting there, then what the hell are you doing? You're not adding anything to it. You might as well just put the artwork back up, and then you might as well just be looking at the art. So always be looking for ways you can add little bits of motion to the whole thing. something else you can do is kind of take the whole scene and then, so let's go ahead and do a Control Alt Y to add a new adjustment layer. Exposure is really fun to play with. You can sit here and just do a little bit of exposure, and that'll kind of give you like a filmic effect. So I'm using Wiggle, which doesn't work for loops at all. But, whoa, Jeffrey, it's 0.5. Okay, so exposure keys off of basically 1, 2. But that's kind of cool. That's something, you know. That's way too bright. Okay, let's make it 0.1. I didn't do this in the original one, but I'm just showing you. Well, now that's not, you know, this is what it is. It's all about walking it in. 0.25. You know, it's all about sitting here and playing with things, having fun. Yeah. So there it goes. I don't know why you do that. Now you need to make this loop, and you can get away with a crossfade in some respects, but I'm going to show you in my next video where maybe we'll animate a card from start to finish. Some actual expressions that you can use to make things loop seamlessly off of organic driven effects like Wiggle. Very cool. Okay. So I was talking about the background needs to have something going on. You need to have your subject of your animation, which is generally going to be maybe a subject, maybe a figure. In this case, it's our splatter and our blood dripping in. But you always want to have a focal point, something somebody's looking at that really is like, oh, that's awesome. That is the coolest thing in the animation. And then overall, and then global effects is the last one I wanted to talk about. We need to add some kind of overall, that's sort of our exposure idea. Give it all a feel, you know, something like the smoke layer is giving the whole world, kind of cinching it together. And with that, we can loop back and forth and see that it's a perfect loop. Again, just using crossfades in this one, the most simple way to loop things. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. Then we end up with this awesome Grim Tutor animation. So, I'll come back. I hope you got something out of that. Show you how the rabbit comes out of the hat a little bit with some of these. It's less complicated than you think in a lot of ways. Maybe it's more complicated. I don't know. Like I said, I've been doing this for a while. This is my first tutorial, so I really, I'm going to put this on YouTube. Sound off in the comments and say like, Jeffrey, this was too fast, or we didn't get enough. I'm looking for feedback because this is my first one that I've done. I want to hear what you guys think because I had fun and I hope you did too. But go try it. Like I said, take a magic card and don't try to do the whole thing. It can be overwhelming. Take one part of it and try to put an effect on there. Cut it out, bring it into After Effects, and try one effect. See if you can make one thing look cool. And if you could make that look cool, okay, great. Then maybe build on that. Or say, okay, great. Just run little experiments. How would I make the blood drip? Then you'll start to get your eye. Then you'll start to get your eye, where you look at a magic card and you say, oh, this has a piece. This has something that works. And your friends are all going to go, hey, I want to see this thing. And it's going to be some hero going, eh. And you're going to be like, that's boring. That's not going to work. I mean, the art is amazing. But what would I add to that? It's like, how would I add to that story of somebody just no. Find something that speaks to you, that has some kind of suggestion of motion, and then see if you can play with that and bring it to life. Photoshop, After Effects, that's what you need, the Adobe Suite. And I think that's where we're going to end things. So I really appreciate you guys taking a look at this. I hope it was fairly informative. And like I say, sound off. Let me know how I did. And follow me on Twitter at LivingCardsMTG. Subscribe on here. I'm going to try to do more of these videos. I know I've been terrible with my YouTube channel. But anyway, give it a shot. And you can do it. I'm telling you. It's if I can do it, you can do it. Take care.